Hello and welcome to today's video. Today we'll be talking about RuPaul's Drag Race Season 16, Episode 4, and the power rankings for these queens. We want to know who's going to be the big winner of Season 16, who's going to be crowned, and we like to rank things. So that's what we're here today. We're trying to figure out who are the true contenders for the crown. And I know a lot of people within the Drag Race fandom are spoiled. They like to know beforehand what's going to happen. I'm not one of those. If you're one of those, great. Please don't put it in the comments. Just keep it to yourself and judge me silently about how wrong my predictions are. But these are the power rankings, the true contenders for the crown. Let's talk a little bit about what a power ranking is. So, this is really the way that I started to think about it. If you're an analytical person, I know a lot of people love those track records. They love to rank queens 1 to 5, how well people are doing. What place did they get high? Did they get low? Bottom 2, top, safe, whatever that means. We've worked that in here within my sort of logic to understand how well these queens are ranking. Then we've also got something like confessionals. How often are we hearing these queens talk about themselves? How often are we hearing them comment on other queens? How often are we hearing them talk about the competition? These are all great indicators of what the producers want us to see. Confessionals aren't the most reliable just because think about Hershey, who went home first this season. She had one of the most confessionals of anyone out of those first couple of episodes, but she still went home in first place. So it can be a good indicator or it can be a bad indicator. It can be any sort of thing here, but it's great to know how often we're seeing them on our screen. And then finally, something I like to call the vibes, which is just basically, what are we feeling? How is the audience feeling about the people that they're seeing on the screen? Are we getting good vibes, bad vibes? Are we feeling like the producers are going to send them home eventually, no matter what they do? Think about Jasmine Kennedy. She went home on the lip sync Lollapalooza regardless of what happened because that's what the vibes were feeling. That's what the fans kind of saw writing on the wall. So we got to work this all in here to make what I call the power rankings. And this is just my opinion. Feel free to share yours if you think I'm wrong. But let's get started. And before we do, we got to talk about Mirage, who went home on the last episode. I love Mirage. She was one of my favorites, but she really wasn't going to be a contender for the crown. Just based on, if you think back to her talent show performance, it was amazing. It was probably one of the fan favorites. It's been one of the most viewed on YouTube. Her song is blowing up everywhere. One of the most streamed Ru Girl songs of all time. But still, the judges didn't give her much of a time of day. She even got kind of negatively critiqued for her performance, saying that it didn't seem planned, was something we heard from Michelle, which is crazy when you saw the skill and talent that went into what Mirage provided. But really, it could just tell you that's what the vibes were saying. It's a good example of how the producers weren't really giving her the time of day and why she went home so soon. It's too bad she didn't know the words to the Cher song, but still, the writing was on the wall for Mirage at this point. Now we can officially move in to our power rankings. Coming in at 12th place, I have Megami. I think Megami is really interesting, mostly because we haven't had a ton of cosplay queens on past seasons. We've had a couple here and there, but no one that really dedicates most of their drag towards cosplay, which is what Megami said right when she walked in on her entrance this season. And the other thing that we know about Megami is that she's a huge name in New York. We've heard a lot of queens talk about how big of a deal Megami is in New York, but mostly because they're mentioning how she's not living up to the reputation that she has in New York, which is not a great sign if you're Megami. Coming in right now, her track record is a bit lower than average. I put her in the low placement for that first episode. I know a lot of the track record gurus said there were no low placements, but when she only got negative critiques for her outfit and for her performance, not only from the queens but also the judges, I'm just going to say that's a low placement. But again, this is my opinion. This is where I will make some judgment calls. When it comes to the confessional count, she comes in at 11th, so she is the second least confessionals of any queens, which neither of these are great signs because if you think about it, we don't know a ton about Megami and her background. And it sounds like she has a really interesting one coming from the cosplay world and doing drag, and something we haven't really seen before. But at this point, I'm not sure that we're going to be able to see much longer unless she really breaks out on some of these upcoming challenges. I thought she did pretty well on the most recent RDR Live challenge. I thought she was funnier than Plain Jane, who was in the same scene with her and got a high placement. But again, if they valued Megami more, the producers, they might have swapped those positions. But that's how you know. That's how you can start to think about who might be our contenders. And that's why I currently have Megami in 12th place. In 11th place, I've got Maya Iman LePage, who I've said this before, she is my favorite from this season. I think that she's so fun, so ridiculous, and her performances are amazing. And what I think is interesting is that all that we're seeing for Maya is the way that the judges think that she is timid and shy. And maybe the responses that she's giving the judges really are timid and shy, or maybe that's the reaction or the editing that we're getting from the producers to kind of reinforce that narrative for us as the viewer. I think from the very beginning, she did amazing in her initial talent show and was probably one of the best of the week, but we didn't really get much praise from the judges and she kind of fell in the middle of the pack. And ever since then, the judges have kind of been rating her lower and lower. Her outfit on the first design challenge wasn't the best in the ball, but I do think that she did not belong in the low position or in the bottom three for that RDR Live. I thought she was hilarious. I thought she really went for it and took a chance in a way that a lot of the other queens did not. She was the only one that made me laugh the entire time except for Plasma, who won the challenge. So I really felt like she could have been in the top that episode. But again, the judges didn't think so, and neither did the producers, which is why she's ranked so low and why I put her so low in the power rankings. And on top of that, when it came to confessionals, she was the lowest on her first appearance and continues to be pretty low and ends up the 12th least, so the lowest number of confessionals of any queen left in the competition. And I'm hoping that after her amazing Cher, Kermit the Frog impression that we got last week, the judges are willing to give her a second look. And we've seen that kind of happen before, where something happens like that can bring a queen from the bottom closer towards the top and give them another chance. We kind of saw it with someone like Elliot with 2 T's. From her initial performance, she had that amazing lip sync against La La Ree, where people saw, hey, maybe this someone that was very low to the bottom actually has a little bit of a chance. And she stayed for a couple more weeks longer than people thought she would. So maybe something like Maya, that will happen with Maya this go around. Maya's amazing. I love her. I hope that we get to see more of her on our screens moving forward. In the 10th position, I have Geneva Carr. She's a pretty interesting story because she did start the season so strong, landing in the top 2. And while people may have thought someone like Nymphia Wind should have ended up in the top, Geneva nonetheless was rated into the top and got great critiques for her performance. But since then, she's been in the bottom 2. And to be honest, I do think that the judges were ready to cut her if she were to lose the lip sync last week to Mirage, or basically if Mirage had known the words, I think that Geneva probably would have gone home. But she didn't. She's still around, and I do think she has a chance because we've gotten a decent amount of confessionals from here, probably one of the higher amounts among all the queens, ending up in 5th on the hierarchy. But I do think that's why I've kind of moved her down in the vibes, is because I think she was at very much risk of going home last week with her bottom 2 placement, with her performance being the worst in the challenge. And I think if things don't change for Geneva moving forward, we might have another similar Amethyst story where we had someone who was consistently in the bottom, saved herself twice within a lip sync, but then went home 2 weeks later. We'll see what happens with Geneva moving forward. In the 9th position, I have a mandatory meeting. I've moved her up in the hierarchy this week, and I think that's because she's been having a lot of conflict with Plain Jane. which I think has brought her stock up for the producers. She's halfway in the hierarchy for confessionals. She has the 6th most. And with the track record, she's in the middle. I put her low on that first week. I know a lot of people kept her safe, but from the judges' reactions and the queen's reactions, especially to her look, I put that as a low placement. And that's really how it felt as a fan for how she was treated. But a mandatory meeting is moving up, like I said, because when there's conflict between two queens, they either keep those two around for a while. We saw Diabetes kind of reinforce her perspective and reinforce her place in the competition because she added conflict. And if a mandatory meeting has conflict with Plain Jane, that could potentially carry them through for a while until they inevitably end up in the bottom together and have a lip sync where they compete and one of them stays. At this point, I would put my money on Plain Jane just based on the way that it's been edited, but time will tell. Maybe Amanda will have the glow up as we've kind of seen with her makeup. Moving into the 8th position, I have Tsunami Muse. And I think Tsunami is an interesting story because she's really at this point the definition of being somewhere in the middle. I gave her a low placement the first week because she was very negatively critiqued by the queens for her performance being very lackluster, kind of forgettable. And in terms of confessionals, she had a lot at the very beginning, but now she's kind of tapered off and been in the middle. We did hear a little bit more about her background, being a dreamer, and hearing about where she came from on the most recent episode. But other than that, we don't know a whole lot about her other than she has a big reputation in New York, similar to Megami, but was not living up to that, at least at the very beginning. I think she's pretty middle of the road at this point. She has a chance that she could break out and start to kind of really start killing these challenges, especially with the girl groups coming up. I think she's got a great chance, but at this point, she's been pretty safe, middle of the road, moving at this point. Moving into the 7th position, I've got Morphine. Morphine is really interesting because we hear a lot from Morphine. She had the most confessionals both the first and second week, which she's the only queen that's been able to do that so far until she was overtaken this last week by Plasma. But in terms of track record, she's been consistently safe. She had an okay performance in all 3 of the challenges so far, and I do think that because we're hearing so much from her, the judges want us to notice her. They want us to be aware of what Morphine is doing, what she has to say, and maybe it's just because she'll be the narrator for the season, who don't usually go on to win, but they do stick around for a while. And I think we'll be seeing more of Morphine for a while. I am hoping that she is able to kind of showcase some of her skills moving forward because at this point, we don't know a whole lot about her drag other than she does amazing work with makeup, which is true. I would agree with that. But otherwise, let's just keep hearing from Morphine, see what we can find out, and hopefully her performance in the competition, in the challenges, will start to shine and she can move up. In 6th is someone that I've kind of been dropping in my own personal power rankings over the coming weeks, and that's Dawn. I really, really liked Dawn when she started. When she came in, she was hilarious in the initial challenge with Ru with the ring camera. I thought she was super funny there. I thought that her makeup was really interesting at the start, but as time has gone on, we've kind of seen some of her villainous tendencies, which is what's been called out by some of the queens if you look on Twitter. You also will see her performance in the challenges has been a little bit lackluster, particularly in the ball. I think many fans, especially Dawn herself, thought she would be in the top for the ball, and when she wasn't in the top, I think that was a huge blow to her kind of prospects within the competition because I think sewing is one of the things she does best, and to have her not be in the top for the ball was kind of a big hit for her track record and for her power ranking, in my opinion. I do think she can recover, but from being one of my top picks from the very beginning, I think that with her consistency of her makeup kind of being in the middle, I think that fans may grow tired of what they're seeing, and she may not be able to rebound if she doesn't start to kind of have breakout performances moving forward. time will tell on Dawn. I still think she's really interesting. She's another one of these sort of cosplay queens with her elf drag, and I hope that we get to see more of these moving forward. But let's see where it goes for Dawn. In the 5th position, I've got Plasma. She's someone that's been rising in my rankings over the coming weeks, or the past weeks. Her track record was pretty safe for the first couple of weeks, and then she had that breakout performance in RDR Live where she was clearly the winner. If you didn't think about Maya, who is my favorite. Plasma Boys did amazing, though, in that challenge, deserved to win, and has been the narrator as of this point, along with Morphine for this season. So we're always hearing what Plasma has to say, how she's feeling, and I think that was especially emphasized on the most recent episode because she did win. We did hear a lot from her. So I think that Plasma is in a great spot to keep growing, keep building her skills and building her reputation on the season. Hopefully she doesn't end up like Jan, but she already has a win. So sorry, Jan. We will see where Plasma goes, but I think she's on the rise here. In 4th place, I've got Plain Jane. She's somebody that the producers really care about, and we're seeing a lot about her this season. She is tied for first place in the track record right now, with her win the first week and then a high placement last week. Her high placement last week was pretty iffy in the RDR Live performance. She did that kind of advertisement with Megami, and she was okay. She was fine. I mean, that challenge wasn't super great for anyone. The writing was pretty bad, but I think that the fact that she got a high placement here is showing that the judges really do want to highlight Plain Jane moving forward. And we also are hearing a lot from her. She's 3rd in the confessional, so we're getting a lot from Plain Jane. I think that despite her being the villain at this point, we will still see more of Plain Jane throughout the season. Maybe she's not being set up for a win at this point, but she's set up for a deep run at this point with the way she's been going. In 3rd place, I have Saphira Crystal. I love her because she's from Philadelphia. I live in Philadelphia. She's also tied for first place after winning that first week and then being high in the ball. I loved her pumpkin look. I know a lot of people didn't think so, but I thought it was super cool. I think that she is in a great spot. She's really surprised a lot of people, I think, because her entrance look was amazing, but I think her initial outfit was pretty lackluster in some fans' opinions, especially with the breastplate she wore. But I think that she's really come into her own with her outfits, with her performances, and she's not really fading when it comes to being in the challenges and performing in the competition. She is not being highlighted, though, in the confessionals. She's kind of become a supporting character at this point, which is fine. We've seen that happen for some queens before. But I do think that until we start hearing more from her, we can't really set her up as a potential winner because we don't know a whole lot about her and her background and where she's going. But hopefully we'll get more of that as the season goes on. And usually that's what they do for people that go far. So at this point, I've got her at number 3. In number 2, we've got Q, who is currently number 1 as well, tied with both Plain Jane and Saphira for number 1 in the track record. I think that her promo look here is really interesting, really cool, big fan. I think what's interesting about Q is that she's performing really well in the challenges, but she's already giving hints of sort of the delusional edit with her saying, I should have been in the top for the ball. I should have won over Nymphia because I used unconventional materials. And when the judges hear that, they're like, okay, it's time. Let's keep edging her, getting her closer to the win, but not giving it to her. And that's exactly what happened with Lucy. And Lucy could have had a couple more wins if she hadn't been treated like by the producers for the way that she was acting. And I think we could see that with Q. It's a little early to tell at this point if they might give her a win. She's been in the top every single week. I think she arguably could have won the first week. She could have won the ball. So we'll see where Q goes. At this point, I think she's on the rise and is set up to go far. In first position, I do have Nymphia Wind. And I know she's not number 1 in track record. She's not number 1 in confessionals. but really just the vibes are right for Nymphia this season. I think that she's been amazing in her first two challenges, which were the talent show, where she could have been ranked in the top if maybe not for someone like Plain Jane. We'll never know. And she knocked the ball out of the park, which I think is what really catapulted her to the number one position, at least in my power rankings. She did sort of fade to the background on the most recent episode. She only had a single confessional, but I do think that that's not a mark on someone that the producers obviously think so highly of, giving her the win last week, as well as the other queens this season giving her lots of praise for her performances and for just who she is as a queen. People were genuinely afraid of her when she walked in because they knew how amazing she is of a queen. We also have learned a bit about her background, being from Taiwan, what the scene looks like for drag in Taiwan, which I think is really interesting, and it's a new perspective for Drag Race. And Nymphia is just a lot of fun to watch. She also is developing relationships with people on the cast, particularly Plain Jane, who I also have slated to go far. So I do imagine that close friendship will help catapult both of them being fierce competitors into the top for this season. So number one, I've got Nymphia, and I'm standing by that. I think she's got a great chance to win this season. But what do you all think? Drop it in the comments. Do you think my power rankings are crap? They very well could have been. I just do this based on, like I said, a couple of the analytical things, but also just a lot of vibes. And I think we could all do with some vibes. So drop a comment if you disagree, do agree. Please don't drop any spoilers. I don't want to know who will win. I think this is a lot of fun to speculate, and this is why we love Drag Race, because we get to see lots of great queens doing some great performances and just having a lot of fun. So keep watching. I'll see you next week for another round of power rankings. Thanks.